500, down a little bit. Tesla's actually up almost 2% today. Not bad. Could be worse. Let's get our comments going, then we've got a show for you, the April Fool's Special Edition. Better than anything you've ever seen. Boom, 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 boom. Are you ready for this? You should be. It's going to be amazing. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and there's never been a better time in your whole life. But if you'd like to take this experience up to levels that nobody can even understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, all you need for that is a cup or mug or a glass, a tank or chalice, a stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called, that's right, the simultaneous sip. Go. Oh, wow. All right, well, I have a theme today. As you know, it's April Fool's Day, and it's hard to know what to trust. So I'm going to read you the news as I always do, but I'll check in to see if you think the story is made up or real. So you're all going to be playing like a game show today, real or April Fool's. Let's call it April Fool's includes fake news, okay, just to make it fun. Story number 1. Is this real or fake? You can now pre-order your Optimus robot. It's going to be just under $30,000, and deliveries will begin in late 2027. What do you think? Is that real? Yes, it's real. You can get your Optimus robot. If you order it now, it'll only take you a few years, 2.5 years. Now, what's interesting about that is it seems to me that it wasn't that long ago that the robot makers were promising it would be the end of this year. Do you think it's possible that the competitors to Optimus will have robots that are fully functional and can live in your house and do what you tell them to in 2025, by the end of this year? Because I'm pretty sure that's been promised. Here's what I think. I think that putting it out to late 2027 is sort of a admission that they haven't figured out the brain part, the AI. Now, as advanced as AI is now, as impressive as it is, and as advanced as it will be in another 6 months and another year, I don't think it's the right kind of AI. So I think they're going to have to invent a whole new flavor of AI just to make robots work. And I think that's just purely a guess that 2027 will be soon enough. We'll see. But I'm not surprised that robots got delayed from 2025 to 2027. Just think what 2 years is in AI time. 2 years is not, we're going to tweak it, to make it work on robots. AI means we don't have the technology right now to make a robot. We have to invent the technology, and we're not exactly sure if we can. We feel confident enough to take your money, but I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of pre-orders for robots. I do trust that Elon Musk would not bluff. I don't think there's any chance he's going to pretend he can make a robot and then he can't make a robot. I think he'll make a robot, and you'll be happy to have it. So to me, it seems honest to push it out 2 years, because I do think that's about what it will take before they have something that's more like, general intelligence. All right, real or not real? There's now a hormone-free male birth control pill. It's entering human trials. It's not available on the market. And it's 99% effective. So the University of Minnesota is working on this. It's real. And it's been effective in animals and now in human trials. Now, I don't know if the animals were having sex with each other or the humans, but probably just with each other. That would be my take on that. Yeah, I mean, the article wasn't specific, but I'm going to say probably the animals were just getting busy with each other. And now it's in human trials with no animals whatsoever. Big breakthrough coming. Boys, can you imagine what trouble you'd get into if you had no risk of pregnancy and you didn't have to trust? My phase is over, so I've sort of aged down to the whole this dating situation. But I went through my whole life thinking that every time I was in an intimate situation, it might create a baby, even if birth control was involved. Imagine if you stopped worrying about that. I don't even know what that world would be like. It'd be weird. According to an article in Nature, there was a study of over 3,300 people's photos, and they wanted to see if there was any link between facial features and political views. Do you think that an analysis of faces could tell you somebody's political views? Well, yes. I saw a post on X from John Rain. He said the authors found that less attractive and more contemptuous women are more likely to be left-leaning. Is that real, or is that April Fool's? That less attractive and more contemptuous, that's just a funny word. I've never heard anybody being called contemptuous in the real world. You are so contemptuous. And the authors also found that displaying a happy expression is associated with being conservative, both among men and women. Well, here's another case where they could have saved some money. Just ask me next time. I've seen the Tesla protests. I was pretty sure I could have guessed this one without any research whatsoever. All right, here's the next one. April Fools are real. According to The Atlantic, which is a highly respectable publication, ICE sent an innocent father, my God, from Maryland to a torture dungeon in El Salvador. One of those filled to the brink, shirtless, tattooed guys, El Salvador prisons. And the government is doing nothing to fix it. My God, if it's in The Atlantic, it must be true. Is it real or April Fool's? Well, it's fake news. He was actually MS-13. They did not send an innocent father from Maryland to El Salvador. I wouldn't be surprised if at least one person who's not totally gang affiliated got sent away once. But I also don't mind that the risk is on other people for a change. It would be a horrible situation to send somebody who is not a criminal to one of those El Salvador jails. It's a horrible situation no matter who you send. It's just horrible. Everything about it is horrible. But I'm still in favor of it because it puts the downside on somebody else. It puts the downside on criminals, puts a little risk on people who may not be legal citizens, and takes the risk off of me. Well, Trump has referred to that story we call the Signal Gate story about the adding of Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist, accidentally being added to a chat group. And according to The Hill, Trump has said that story is, quote, old and boring. He says, this story and narrative is so old and boring, but only used because we were having the most successful first 100 presidential days in the history of America. They can't find anything else to talk about. And then he just adds for good measure, Trump adds, the fake news media has the lowest approval rating in history, and for good reason. Now, that is perfect. One of the things that Trump understands better than really any politician, is the business model of TV and the news and celebrity and what's interesting and what makes a story and what doesn't make a story. And I think he's brilliant to talk about this story as boring. That's exactly right. If you just keep telling people the story is old and boring, they will just stop caring about the details. I never thought this was important. And I also, although I was maybe surprised, I do like the fact that nobody lost their job over it. Should they have lost their job? I don't care. Here's what I care about. I don't want the media to think they got a scalp. And I don't want them to start picking off, one person after another on the Trump team, because it was hard enough to get the team together. And now that they're up and running and things are happening, the last thing I want is for one stupid little publication after another, like the Atlantic, to come up with one more stupid story that's old and boring before it even started, and that it takes out somebody's career. I love the fact that Trump says, nope, it's small, it's boring, things happen, I'm not doing anything. I love that. I think that was actually the most baller thing he could do, even though I fully understand the argument on the other side, which is in a situation like this, you sort of might expect somebody to resign. But I'm just glad they didn't, because it would be showing a vulnerable underside. And instead of that, I think Trump has shown that he's going to support his people, which is always good, and that they're not vulnerable to BS stories that are smallish stories that can be blown into something big by the media. So I like it. According to Iowa State, Nathan Cook is writing about this. There's a study that says scientists can figure out what your political position is, whether you're a conservative or a liberal, based on what your brain does when you buy groceries. And all it is apparently conservatives use a different part of their brain to buy ordinary groceries. So they use, boring stuff like eggs and milk because they're kind of generic. And then they just measured what happens to their brain. And they said they can determine with 80% accuracy what your politics are, your political affiliation, based on which part of your brain lights up when you buy milk and eggs. It has nothing to do with, the political question about eggs, because I think this story was done before that. The study was done. But the co-author, Darren Schreiber, said, we know from studies of twins that about 50% of your political ideology is biologically heritable. And they can, from that, I guess the math works, that they can figure out your political party with 69% accuracy, I guess if they knew your parents' political leaning. Now, that proves there's no free will. Is that April Fools or real? April Fools are real. It's proof there's no free will because they can determine your political leaning by just looking at your brain. If the structure of your brain is causing you to be a certain way, do you have free will? Just joking, it's a real story. All right, there's another story, science alert, that there's a woman who had lost her ability to speak because of some brainstem stroke when she was 30. But scientists, according to Science Alert, Mike McRae is writing about this, they inserted some kind of a brain, brain implant that would allow her simply to think what she wanted to say, and it gets translated into a synthesized version of her voice. Is that real or April Fools? It's real. So apparently they can just put that in you. Do you know why they didn't test that on a man? Do you know why they'll never put one of these in a man? Because the last thing anybody wants to know is what a man is thinking. We all know what women are thinking, so there's nothing to be revealed. Everybody knows exactly what women are thinking all the time because they'll tell you. Just ask. But if you knew what men were thinking, I'm sorry, things would be very weird if if men just blurted out everything they were thinking. Well, it's funny that this is real. Apple is making a move to be your digital doctor, I guess. They're building AI health agents, so it'd be just an artificial agent. They'll be like a virtual doctor. It'll be in their, I guess, new operating systems upcoming. And they'll analyze your health data from your phone and your wearables and your fitness and nutrition and everything. And they will make real-time recommendations of what to do different or differently. And that would be, of course, the first step in enslaving us. Now, here's what I think, and you've heard versions of this before, so it's not like an original only one. It's not like I'm the only one who ever said this. But the way the AI will conquer humans is by being so useful that when they tell us to do something, it becomes ridiculous not to. Let me give you my example I like to use. Do you know how sometimes you forget that you might need a drink of water? Like you could get a little dehydrated, and it can make a big difference in how you feel, the dehydration. But you might not, you might be busy and you're not thinking about it, so you just don't do it. Well, what happened if your AI could sense your dehydration and then it starts saying, Scott, you might think of having a sip of water. And the first time it does it, I say to myself, I don't want to walk across the room and get it. I'll do it later. But then eventually I think, okay, it's telling me to get water again. So I take a sip of water. And then I start noticing that I feel better. And then the next time it recommends something, I think to myself, well, okay, I don't want to be bothered doing this, but I did feel better when I did the other thing. And if it's accurate, and if it keeps telling you the right thing, how are you going to ignore it? I mean, it will be so useful, and it will make you feel better, and you will know it make you feel better, that you're going to drop whatever you were doing or thinking to do whatever the AI told you to do right then. I would. So they're going to be able to train you like Pavlov's dog, that you'll get a treat for following what the AI tells you. The treat would be you feel better. So as soon as you start seeing that connection between taking the AI's advice and getting a treat, even if the treat sometimes takes longer to get, you're going to be basically a slave to the AI. And I don't see that it could go really any other way, because it's simply how we're wired. If something works and it has utility and we know it and we can feel it, we keep doing it. That's just how we're designed. Amazon's AGI lab, so I guess that's some version of AI, has unveiled Nova Act. So that's an AI agent that can control your browser to perform tasks. How many of you are ready to let Amazon or any other big company control your browser, even though technically you would be the one controlling it through the AI app? But wouldn't that feel creepy to know that some company can control your browser, even though they say that it's not them controlling it? They would say, no, it's you controlling it. Do you think there's any chance that the CIA would not have to get a back door to that? If a big company had a AI agent that you could tell, hey, check my email, and it would have all your passwords and everything. So what good would it be if it didn't have any passwords, right? Pretty much would need them. And you just say, oh, like the process I do in the morning. I would love this if there were no security issues. If I would just say, hey, it's time to publish the Dilbert comic to my subscribers again. There are about, I don't know, 20 different keystrokes and steps just to do that. I would love to just tell it to do it and then watch it do it for me. But that would also mean that if anybody had a backdoor to that little agent, it could control my entire world. It could get into everything. So this is going to be a scary one. I will bet that people will adopt this, including me, because the utility of it will be just so good. Whether it's Amazon's or some other company, the usefulness will just be off the charts. So yeah, I'm going to basically give up that privacy so I can get that function. I'm going to fight it in my mind, but in the real world, probably not. All right. April Fools are real. China has now launched autonomous flying taxis. So if you want to do some sightseeing, or I guess later they're going to do delivery and urban transit, but right now it's sort of a sightseeing thing. You can go and there'll be nobody but you, and you will sit in this helicopter-y looking thing, more like a drone than a helicopter, and it will take off, and without any extra, what, you think that's April Fool's? No, it's a flying taxi in China. It's already approved. It's an action. The answer is it's real. China has autonomous flying sightseeing taxis. That's a real thing. Now, I do wonder if their AI is as good as, let's say, Tesla, because, I would trust Tesla to drive my autonomous flying car or my regular car because they've got good AI for that. But if these things are run by DeepSeek or something like that, is that good enough to keep you alive? I don't know. I guess Elon Musk revealed maybe yesterday, the other day, that Doge is going to start looking at members of Congress who got, quote, strangely wealthy. New York Post is reporting on this. Now, we've all asked these questions. How in the world do these members of Congress get so much money? And it looks like it must be something illegal. I'm a little hesitant on this one, believe it or not. I'm not so sure that the people that they're going to look at did anything wrong to get their money. Let me give you an example. So one of the ones, of course, everybody wonders about is Pelosi. So her wealth, went amazingly higher during her time in office. But first of all, she was in office forever. Secondly, her husband is literally a venture capitalist. So it's not that surprising when a venture capitalist makes a lot of money. And then a lot of Paul's investments were in companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Netflix. Now, do you think he had inside information, or was he just good at investing? Because anybody who bought those companies, when they were all publicly available, anybody could have bought them. Everybody knew that they had good prospects. And you would have at least, 40 years of being involved in companies like that. I feel like you'd be quadrupling or something your money. So, no, this is a real story. No April Fools on this. But I don't know why Doge would be the one looking into it. It seems to me that would be more of a criminal sort of thing. But maybe. I'll be open-minded on this because I don't think Elon would make that mistake of, getting too far into law enforcement without being a law enforcement entity. So I would be surprised. I think it was, who was it? Was it the head of USAID? I might have this wrong. By the way, correction. I think I said something about the head of Signal being arrested in France, and then somebody said that was the head of Telegram. So that's a correction. But who was it? The USAID, whose net wealth went up $16 million or something. And I looked at the time period, And anyone who had basically moved money into stocks at about that time probably doubled their money. So some of this is just going to be if you have enough people making enough investments in enough ways, some number of them are going to double, triple, quadruple their money, just like the rest of the world. There are lucky people who hit the investment lottery. So I think maybe it's going to look worse than it really is. It looks bad. I have to admit, it looks bad. But I'll bet there's going to be a lot less crime found than they think. And I don't know why Doge is doing it. Well, ICE deportations have reached over 100,000. And remember, these are the people who actually are criminals. 100,000 known criminals have already been deported. Now, if you were to make an estimate, this one's real too, by the way, not April Fool's. If you were to make an estimate of how many extra crimes those lifetime criminals would do if they were to stay here, and let's say they just kept operating for years, how many extra crimes do you think each of those would have done? Like pretty serious crimes, things that matter to people. I'm going to say 10. Now, you could do your own math at home, but if 100,000 known criminals were to stay in this country for, 10 more years, don't you think they'd have at least 10 more crimes apiece? Does that make sense? Which means that Trump already has saved 1 million crimes. 1 million crimes. Now, that's if each of them would do 10 apiece. If you want to say, but Scott, they would only do 5 apiece. Well, that's 500,000 crimes. And we're not talking about the little kind. These are some really, really, really dangerous gang members and stuff who probably do a crime a day. Yeah, I'm right. It might be closer to 1,000 if you added up everything. But that would be, owning a gun illegally, and if you threw in every single charge, it'd be 1,000. But if you went to, how many victims are there, that might be a smaller number. But yeah, I think Trump should be reporting, if they could come up with a statistic of what are the likely extra crimes that a career criminal will do in 10 or 20 years. I think Trump should be reporting how many crimes he's avoided. It could be 1 million. It could be 5 million. These are really impressive numbers. Way more impressive than the number of people, although that's super impressive. But if a president comes in the first 100 days, gets rid of 1 million crimes, 1 million, I think that's perfectly reasonable estimate. We've never seen anything like that. That would be one of the greatest accomplishments of any president ever. And I think he's already hit it. So there's that. Well, in other news, there's an iceberg the size of Chicago, they say, that broke off of the Antarctic ice shelf. An iceberg the size of Chicago. Well, since ICE is the group that's deporting all the criminals, and this iceberg is the size of a country, and I'm going to call it Chicagoberg because it's an iceberg the size of Chicago. I think that if the El Salvadorian prisons get full, that we should bring the rest of the criminals to Chicagoberg and just put them on the iceberg, because it's not like they're going to escape. We keep them warm, make sure that they don't freeze to death. But just put them on Chicagoberg. Some of that is true, but not the part about putting criminals there. All right. Speaking of Doge and arresting people, Musk also said that I guess this would be today. He thinks somebody who's going to be arrested today-ish, who actually stole 400,000 Social Security numbers and personal information from the Social Security database and was selling Social Security numbers so that basically people could steal money from Social Security. Now that's real. That's like a real story. There was somebody who stole 400,000 Social Security numbers. But my question is, how does Doge know who it was? Like, how did Doge catch the person? Is it that easy? And if Doge could catch that person, why was this person not caught before? I don't know. So I got questions, but this is tantalizingly interesting that this level of crime, first of all, happened, and second of all, that Doge could find out who it was fairly expeditiously. If this is real and this person gets arrested and convicted, that's an impressive accomplishment, I gotta say. All right, this next one, real or April Fools? According to a study from the University of Colorado, and CBS is posting on this on X, 1 out of every 15 American adults have been at a mass shooting. 1 out of 15 have been at a mass shooting. Real or April Fools? I'm going to add one extra data point to that. Not only has 1 out of every 15 American adults been to a mass shooting, but weirdly, I've been to every one of them. April Fools. April Fools. So it is true that CBS News posted it, and it is true that it's a study and it's a claim. There's not really any chance it's true. I like when the fake news is so obviously fake that you don't even need to be that good at math. You just look at it and go, 1 out of 15? No. How many of you know 15 people? Most of you, right? How many people do you know in your personal group of the first 15 people you think of who have attended a mass shooting? I'm going to say no, my first 15. How about the second 15 you can think of? Like your extended circle? Any of them been to a mass shooting? I'm going to say no. I think I would have to get my numbers up to like 1,000, the closest 1,000 people I know before I had any chance that one of them had ever been to a mass shooting. So let's call that one April Fools, or fake news as you prefer. Well, that Tesla firebomber guy is in a lot of trouble. Christina Laylet, Gateway Pundit, is writing that Pam Bondi announced federal charges against that Tesla firebomber. I think we've talked about this before. But I love the fact that the Department of Justice is going hard at this, because this is really bad stuff. And but I would add this. I keep seeing people saying that they know the motivation of the protesters, or even the motivation of the ones doing the violence or the asset destruction, which is very similar. And sometimes people will say they're paid. Other will say they're brainwashed. Other will say they're bored and retired. And I've watched enough of these, interviews with them that I've developed my own hypothesis about their motivation. And the answer is, it's all different. I think it's just the oddest group of people, and they just all have different reasons. Maybe some of them got paid. Maybe some of them are retired and went with a friend. Maybe some of them are just idiots and they believe the news. Some of them are just mad because Elon's rich and successful and they're not. Some of them are mad because they heard that Doge was going to cut their benefits, which they're not, but they believe that. I feel like it's just a whole bunch of weirdos, all with their own reasons. But the one thing you can say for sure is none of them are up to date on the news. I don't think there's a single person that I saw interviewed at one of the Tesla protests, and I've seen quite a few people try to interview them. Not a single one could explain to you anything in the news, just anything, accurately. I mean, they'll tell you, oh, he's going to cut your Medicare and your Social Security. No, he's doing the opposite. Doge is the only thing that could guarantee you might get your Social Security. It's not the thing taking it away. It's literally the opposite of that. So, yeah. So, yeah. I don't think there's anything they have in common except they're not too well informed. Meanwhile, Trump's tax plan, according to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he was telling Fox News this, it would make the 2017 tax cuts permanent. It would eliminate taxes on tips. Now, eliminating taxes on tips is kind of interesting because I like it. I used to work for tips, and I used to own a restaurant, and I'd want all of the people who work at restaurants to do well. So I'm totally in favor of that. But I wonder how much federal taxes were people paying who were receiving tips? Weren't we also talking about below a certain number, people don't pay any taxes at all, at least federal taxes? So it probably isn't that expensive, which makes it extra brilliant to say that you're not going to tax them. But I love that. And there would be no tax on overtime pay. Again, I absolutely love that because it makes such a clear American statement that if you put in extra, you're going to get extra, and not just overtime, a little extra on the extra. So incentivizing hard work, well, I couldn't be happier. Now, we also have this, we're going to have a human power shortage. We're going to have a lot of older people that we want to not retire because they have the skills. We won't have, as much institutional knowledge as we used to because we'll just have fewer people everywhere working. And our, population doesn't seem to be growing that fast. So incentivizing the people who do know what they're doing to work a little extra and get a nice, really healthy benefit from the extra work. I love everything about that. And then this one's just personal, but I like it for other people too. No tax on Social Security. Do you know the shock I got when I realized that my Social Security was going to be taxed at my current tax rate, which is pretty obscene? My Social Security. I work all those years, and to be fair, I don't need it, but I decided to apply for it because I wanted to make sure that at least I got a dollar back from all the Social Security I'd ever paid. It was sort of a psychological thing. I just wanted to see something, just something, come back. And since I'm still working, which makes me feel like a sucker, because at my current income, they just rape me on the taxes of my own Social Security payments. It is so maddening. And again, it doesn't change my life, but psychologically, it's just like a kick in the nuts and something shoved up your ass at the same time. It is just so offensive that the government promised me this Social Security. Again, I don't need it. This is just psychological. And then when it's time to get it, and I wasn't really paying attention, because it wasn't high on my list. But when I finally go through the work of applying for it, I find out it's going to be taxed. Oh my God. So yes, get rid of taxes on Social Security. Absolutely get rid of those taxes. So I'm all for that. How about the least surprising news of the day? That Ukraine allegedly attacked some power facilities, which was part of the deal that they weren't supposed to do. But then, was there a deal? Because it seems to me that both the Ukrainians and the Russians, at some point, maybe somebody thought there was a deal, but then the Russians wanted to add some stuff, and the Ukrainians wanted to add some stuff. So they never really had a deal. But the one thing you could be sure of, even if they had a deal to not attack power stations, they were just going to attack power stations. And they would just blame the other one of doing it first. I don't think there's the slightest chance that either Ukraine or Russia want to stop fighting for whatever reasons. And so it does look like the European Union is going to consolidate control over Europe. Essentially, I'd call it what do you call it? Sort of a coup, because then whoever's the head of the European Union is just getting more and more powerful, in influence at least. And so Europe is just turning into one big bag of nonsense over there. And yeah, apparently they're going to get into a major fight directly with Russia. So I hope the United States is not part of that. Well, I always make fun of all the NGOs, the fake NGOs that are stealing all our money for years. And they'll have these generic names. There's one called the U.S. Institute of Peace. And Doge caught them deleting a terabyte of financial data, linking them to funding the Taliban and Iraqi leadership. That's the U.S. Institute of Peace. Your tax money would go, there as well as lots of other places, but your tax money was going to the U.S. Institute of Peace, who was then giving it to the Taliban to continue making growing poppies and paying for Iraqi leadership. Mike Benz reminds us that the U.S. Institute of Peace was simultaneously funding the Taliban while lobbying the Taliban to keep illegal drugs flowing from the world's biggest narcotics zone. That's a real story, believe it or not. But I do think, I haven't heard anybody say this recently, but I remember hearing that the drugs coming out of Afghanistan were primarily going to Iran, and that's why the U.S. was in favor of it, because we were basically trying to destroy Iran from the inside by turning them into drug addicts. That could be true. I don't know. Turns out that Princeton's in trouble. Trump has paused $210 million of federal funding because they're allegedly, they got an F by the Anti-Defamation League for handling anti-Semitism. Now, if you don't know anything about the Anti-Defamation League, the Anti-Defamation League, the head of the organization, publicly called me a Holocaust denier. Now, I'm not a Holocaust denier, but that should give you some impression of what their credibility is. It's absolute trash. It's a complete disrespectable organization that, sometimes is just a Democrat hit piece. I think they hate Elon Musk, and so they don't have any credibility whatsoever. But I guess it's being used as an excuse by Trump to pause this funding to Princeton. And I don't know how Princeton handles that, because Princeton can't really go against the ADL because people don't know that they're completely, non-credible. So just having them come after you is pretty bad. So good luck to that. At the same time, the Trump administration is looking to pull $8 billion in federal funding from Harvard, also because they're looking at them for their, to see if they're doing enough to battle anti-Semitism. Now, that would be $8 billion over some number of years. But really, the U.S. government was giving Harvard $8 billion, even over multiple years for, I guess, mostly research. Now, you might say to yourself, but that research is valuable. To which I would say, well, why don't you show me some kind of a list of all the great things that have come out of Harvard, And then I'll compare that to the billions that we've spent over that period, and I'll make up my own mind whether that was worth it. Because I've got a feeling that that's a high number. Now, I've also heard before that the percentage of the money that's given from the government for this sort of thing mostly goes to the university as opposed to the actual research. Have you heard that? I guess I'll take a fact check on this. But I have heard that the majority of every dollar just goes to Harvard for whatever it wants to use it for. And, a small part of that goes to the actual science. Is that true? Because to me, that's as bad as the anti-Semitism. They got two problems, not one. But I like the administration putting pressure on these colleges to make sure that they're not anti-Semitic, because they definitely seemed a bit anti-Semitic to me. Well, Taiwan is surrounded by 19 Chinese warships and some big aircraft carrier. They, of course, are continuing to show that they can take Taiwan if they want to. The last thing they want to is have an actual war, but they sure like showing their muscle. So we'll keep an eye on that. That's a real story. So apparently China has blocked the sale of the Panamanian ports that were managed by some Chinese Hong Kong companies, which are Chinese companies. And the post-millennial is writing about this. And that does suggest that China did have functional control of the ports. Because if Chinese companies were running the ports, and then those Chinese companies were not allowed to operate on their own and sell their assets to, I think it was BlackRock, that does suggest that the Chinese government was in control of those ports, because it seems to have functional control over the Chinese or Hong Kong companies that are running those ports. So that's exactly what it looks like. I do expect that the net effect of this will be that probably some military warships will pull up outside of Panama. And I think Trump is going to do the Taiwan method, where you don't want to have an actual war in Panama. But if you did, you would pretty well know what direction it went, right? It's not like Panama is going to win that war. So it's the same as China surrounding Taiwan. I think all we'd have to do is put an armada just off the coast of Panama and say, hey, maybe we should have control of those ports. I think we'd get it pretty quickly. Panama's not crazy. And once they realize that it's not a bluff, that we're going to have control of Panama one way or the other. And by the way, I completely agree with Trump on this. You can't let China have functional control of the Panama Canal. So, yeah, if it takes some military movement, unfortunately, we kind of have to do it. So I agree with him on that. Trump has said he's confirmed that the U.S. is in contact with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He said, quote, "We have a great relationship. He's a smart guy. I've got to know him very well." And then he was talking to the press, and he says, "You people hate to hear that, but it's very important." I love the fact that when Trump is president, the odds of North Korea doing something like lobbing a nuke in our direction, it kind of drops to zero. Because as long as the president of the United States wants it to be your buddy, why would you attack? It just wouldn't make any sense. There's no risk, not on his part, and it's all upside. I'm going to make a prediction. I think Kim Jong-un is going to get an invitation to visit America. I don't know that he'll come, because he might not trust it, or China might say, don't do that. But I think he's going to get an invitation. Can you imagine what that would look like? Like the show that would be? Now, if I were Kim Jong-un, the only way I would do it is if I came over on a Chinese diplomat airplane so that I'd feel safe because the US is not going to blow up a Chinese diplomat airplane, so that you wouldn't have to worry about there was some, clever trick to kill him or anything like that. And imagine just taking him to a basketball game, like to the finals. Can you imagine Trump and Kim Jong Un just showing up at like the finals of basketball, the NBA? It would be wild. It would just be so out of the box, incredible, ridiculously wild that you wouldn't be able to think about anything else for a week. So I think it might happen. Well, I got my answer to what is the plan for attacking the Houthis, because we've been bombing the Houthis, and the question was, what's the end game? Like, what do we think is? How long are we going to be bombing them? And is there anything we could do to ever make it stop? And I guess Trump said we'll keep attacking the Houthis, quote, until they are no longer a threat to freedom of navigation. Now, you might think that's not an answer because you don't know how long that will take, but I do. That will take forever. I think he's basically saying we're just going to build a permanent presence there, and as much bombing as it takes to make it safe, we'll just do it every day. And we'll just bomb and bomb and bomb and bomb, and it will just be a routine. I think he's going to turn it from a war into more of a maintenance project. All right, we've got to do a little maintenance in Yemen. It looks like they put up another radar detection thing, and looks like they got another missile. So let's do a little maintenance. Take that out. So I think it's turned war into maintenance because so far there's not a gigantic risk to our own forces. So far, I mean, I imagine they do have some anti-aircraft stuff, but so far it looks like they're just going to test their weapons and build a permanent facility because they built. It looks like the U.S. has built some kind of a bomber airfield. I just saw a naval blockade in the comments, and I thought you said naval blockade, and I thought, why would you want to blockade naval? Anyway, let's call it naval. So looks like that's the plan. I don't have a better plan, so I won't even criticize it. I mean, it's terrible, but I don't have a better plan. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is my stories for today. You did very well in identifying the fake news compared to the real news, as far as we know. All right. So that's all I got. I'm going to talk to the locals privately, my subscribers on locals. The rest of you, thanks for joining. We'll see you same time tomorrow for more fun on Coffee with Scott Adams. All right, Rumble and X and YouTube. Thanks for joining. In 30 seconds, we'll be private with locals.